While considering the possibility of a divorce, I still want to continue living with our son. Despite my husband Daniel's harsh criticisms, he seemed at ease after taking a deep breath. I was thinking about how to reply when our son, who had been quietly observing from the background, stepped forward. "Dad, if you're not aware, let me fill you in," he said, pointing at his father's mistress, which unexpectedly made me smile. "My name is Abigail, and I turned 39 this year. I work as a freelance illustrator. Daniel and I have been married for 13 years, and we have a son in 7th grade. Throughout our marriage, Daniel has struggled to hold down a job for long, resulting in most of our family income coming from my freelance work. Balancing household duties, raising our son, and my career has been challenging but necessary, especially since Daniel only took sporadic short-term jobs. Initially, as a newcomer to the freelance world, I managed to create a stable income flow. My consistent efforts and the referrals from former clients led to new opportunities. Now, I create illustrations for educational magazines and brochures. With our son Peter growing up, I've been able to work from home and also venture out for work a few times a week. We've managed to live harmoniously as a trio, but Daniel's lack of direction has been a constant worry. At 42, he seems satisfied with a directionless life, seldom working full-time. Despite having ample free time, he contributes little to household chores or parenting. His disinterest in Peter, who is navigating his challenging teenage years, has been particularly frustrating. Peter, though not very vocal, occasionally helps around the house without needing to be asked. However, Daniel shows little involvement with our son and hardly ever takes on household responsibilities. Lately, Daniel has been coming home late more often, which adds to my unease and frustration. Even on days he claims to be working, I suspect he might be up to something else. His recent eagerness to drop off and pick up Peter from his basketball club has also raised my suspicions, as it goes against our household rule that a parent should always handle these tasks. While I appreciated the assistance, a nagging feeling of unease had been growing inside me for some time. Recently, my suspicions began to solidify. One afternoon, as I deviated from my usual route to explore a new path home, I found myself near the basketball center where my son Peter spends a lot of time. On a whim, I decided to do some shopping in the area. To my surprise, I spotted my husband Daniel there. He wasn't supposed to be around. He had told me he would be working out of town and expected to be home late. There he was, conversing cheerfully with a woman who seemed to be affiliated with the basketball center. My heart sank as I watched them from a distance. The woman caught my eye and, recognizing me, tilted her head slightly. "Excuse me, are you Peter's mom?" she asked. I nodded reluctantly, and she expressed her gratitude for my son being under her supervision. Feeling awkward but curious, I engaged in small talk with her, trying to learn more about her involvement at the center while consciously ignoring Daniel, who appeared stiff and anxious. The woman introduced herself as Mary, but was oddly vague about her exact role, which only deepened my confusion. My husband, ignoring my puzzled look, seemed keen to wrap up their conversation quickly. The ride home was silent. Daniel avoided making eye contact and seemed more distant than ever. His recent pattern of late returns, his eagerness to handle the drop-offs and pickups at Peter's activities, combined with his awkward behavior upon being spotted, intensified my suspicions. The uneasy feeling lingered that Mary might be more involved in Daniel's life than just a staff member at the basketball facility. As we walked, I couldn't shake off the thought that he might be having an affair with this younger woman. I felt a shift in his demeanor ever since he started managing the transportation for Peter's activities, marked by a growing distance that seemed to wedge itself between us. When I questioned our son about his father's peculiar behavior, he responded abruptly, showing his annoyance. It felt increasingly wrong to push our son into going to the facility every day, where Mary seemed to always be. My suspicions about my husband grew deeper, and they were soon confirmed. I noticed Mary visiting our home more often than seemed necessary. While she mentioned it was in connection to our son, It was apparent she only came when my husband was there, not when it was just me or our son. Watching Daniel and Mary chatting so animatedly in our living room, I felt certain of Daniel's infidelity. A month after I began noticing these odd behaviors, Daniel started coming home later and at times would be gone for days. Once, when I made a lighthearted comment about his late returns, suggesting he might as well admit to cheating, he abruptly stood up, glared at me, and snapped, "Just stick to your work. I'm taking care of Peter, so don't pry into it unnecessarily." He stormed out of the room, leaving me fuming over his dismissal, especially since he had largely left the housework and Peter's care to me. My frustration spilled over during one of our petty arguments, and Peter, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "What's the matter, Mom?" he asked, sensing the tension. Trying to keep the conversation light, I inquired why he was still up. From his bedroom doorway, Peter hesitated before sharing his observations of Mary, the staff member he suspected was his father's mistress. He explained how she often approached him at the basketball facility, annoying him with her clinginess. He was frustrated that she had started visiting our house frequently, a sentiment I deeply shared. It was clear that Peter disliked having someone from his basketball club impose on our personal space, which gave me some relief. However, the problem persisted. Returning home from a client meeting one day, I overheard a cheerful conversation in the living room. It was Daniel and Mary. Peter was conspicuously absent, holed up in his room. As I entered the room, both Daniel and Mary turned toward me. Mary, with unsettling confidence, greeted me. "Welcome back, Peter's mom." "I ran into Daniel, so he invited me in," she said, casually using my husband's name. This familiarity unnerved me. Attempting to use sarcasm, I questioned her about her frequent visits. She responded with a smug expression, claiming it was part of her job. Her audacity didn't stop there. She even critiqued our housekeeping, commenting that while the house felt cozy, it lacked thorough cleaning. My husband, disturbingly, did not challenge her remarks. Daniel's laughter echoed in the living room as he sided with Mary, mocking my efforts at housekeeping. Working from home, I always felt a bit self-conscious about not keeping up with all the chores. If only Daniel had taken a more active role in helping around the house, and with our son, perhaps I wouldn't have felt so overwhelmed. Feeling ridiculed and unable to bear the tension any longer, I swiftly left the living room and retreated to the bedroom, my emotions and belongings in tow. Overwhelmed by frustration, sadness, and embarrassment, I feared that Mary might eventually replace me in our family dynamics. Despite the awkwardness of that encounter, Daniel and Mary continued to flaunt their relationship, leaving me utterly speechless. I later heard from acquaintances that they often met under the pretense of discussing our son's education, which deepened my sense of betrayal. During Daniel's frequent absences, I began searching for tangible proof of his infidelity. Despite his earlier claims that we couldn't afford extravagant gifts, I found receipts from motels, upscale restaurants, and luxury items like high-end watches and jewelry hidden in his coat pocket. These were places he insisted were out of our financial reach, yet the receipts showed he frequented them not with his wife, but with his mistress. The pain of his deceit was profound, yet I kept my composure, diligently gathering evidence of his affairs. Although the thought of divorce crossed my mind, I resolved to wait until our son Peter graduated from high school. However, I vowed to collect enough evidence to ensure a favorable outcome should separation become inevitable. The pressing question remained: where was the money for Daniel's extramarital activities coming from? Remembering our house's savings account set aside for Peter's college fund, a chill ran down my spine as I reviewed the transactions. The account had seen substantial withdrawals over the past few months, and the balance had significantly decreased. The money meant for our son's future was being squandered on selfish desires. This betrayal against our child felt even more profound than the betrayal against me as his wife. Suppressing my anger, I chose to act normally, not wanting to distress our son, who was deeply engrossed in his studies. However, the stress took its toll, leading to small mistakes in household chores and at work. Even Nancy, a longtime client, noticed my worn-out state and expressed her concern, offering comfort. As I struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy, Daniel seemed more relaxed, reveling in his affair without my interference. Meanwhile, Peter, sensing something was amiss, began to quietly help with household tasks, stepping in where his father had stepped back. Peter folded laundry beside me and said softly, "I kind of know what's going on, Mom. Do whatever you need to do. You don't have to worry about me." His words, though few, warmed my heart and simultaneously stoked the fire of my anger towards the traitor who had dipped into the funds set aside for our son's future. This betrayal demanded retribution. I pondered reaching out to someone who had promised support, weighing my options carefully. With clenched fists, I secretly vowed vengeance against my husband and his mistress. One evening, Daniel abruptly mentioned he would be going on a week-long work trip for training in another state. This claim immediately raised my suspicions since the restaurant chain he worked for had no operations outside our state, and he had previously bragged about job perks that included not having to relocate. Suspicion grew when Peter casually mentioned that a staff member from his club, Mary, would also be taking the same week off. Daniel's startled reaction and his subsequent silence, frequently glancing anxiously at his smartphone, only confirmed my doubts. With the help of a private investigator, I had been keeping tabs on both him and Mary, confirming that their business trip was a planned romantic getaway. Instead of confronting them immediately, I opted for a more strategic approach. Having uncovered their plans, I coordinated with Peter, and with the support of our relatives, we prepared a significant move. On the day Daniel left, I bid him a calm farewell. While he was away, Peter and I, along with our relatives, began the process of cleaning and packing. Our plan was to move out and stay elsewhere, finding a new home with the support of our family, angered by his betrayal but concerned for Peter's well-being. To safeguard our financial security, I transferred the remaining funds from our joint savings account into my personal account. As we packed, I decided not to leave behind any of his belongings, arranging instead to send them to Nancy's address with her agreement. A few days after we moved, my phone rang. It was Daniel, in a panic, asking for money during his supposed training. I denied his request and confronted him about the missing funds from the account he usually accessed. Mary's frantic voice in the background revealed their financial desperation. The following day, Peter and I arrived at a specific location, an impressive mansion with a well-kept garden. Inside, we found my cheating husband and his mistress sitting on the floor, apologetically facing Nancy. She was not just a longtime client. Her stern expression conveyed she was much more involved and possibly key to my strategic exit from this messy situation. Nancy, the principal of the middle school my son attends, has been a confidant and friend over the years. We often share personal struggles. "I'm deeply sorry for the trouble caused by my husband," she lamented. "In truth, it's my daughter's fault that all of this has come to pass." It turned out that Mary, the woman accompanying my husband on the trip, was forced to return home urgently when her parents questioned her about a mysterious package she had received. Mary insisted that my husband accompany her back, a detail that made Nancy's revelation even more shocking. As Nancy recounted these events, my husband began to tremble with fear. Nancy had become increasingly concerned about my well-being after learning of Daniel's affair from me. When she realized that the mistress was her daughter, she was devastated, but she resolved to make amends for her daughter's actions and had been assisting me in dealing with the situation. Pointing to the piles of boxes around us, she sternly reprimanded Mary, expressing deep disappointment. "You should be ashamed of yourself, always coveting what isn't yours," she scolded. Mary tried to defend herself, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but her mother was having none of it and demanded a sincere apology, promising there would be consequences for her actions. Amid Mary's protests, I turned to my husband, who stood silently beside her. "Don't you have something to say to me?" I asked him sharply. At that moment, Peter, who had been quietly supporting me from behind, stepped forward. "She's not a regular staff member, just an intern at the club," he stated firmly, addressing Mary directly. "And don't you ever try to get friendly with me again? Always flirting. It's disgusting." As my son spoke, the absurdity of the situation became glaringly obvious. My husband had been deceived into believing Mary was a professional experienced in student education and activities, which was laughable given her actual status as just an intern. This confrontation peeled back the layers of deception, revealing truths that had been hidden beneath the surface of our lives. As I observed the overwhelmed Mary, it became evident that both she and my husband harbored undisclosed secrets. Before departing, I felt an urge to share some insights with Mary. I revealed to her, "You might not know this, but I've been covering our rent, daily expenses, and even Peter's college fees." At this revelation, Daniel, who had been masquerading as financially stable by working sporadic jobs, was visibly shaken. Mary was so taken aback that she fainted. It had always appeared as though Daniel was affluent, while in reality, I was the primary provider. In Mary's eyes, I had seemed like a lethargic figure who neither contributed financially nor managed the household duties well. This reality shattered Nancy's world as she was faced with the stark truth my husband and I presented. Following this upheaval, Daniel was ousted from Nancy's residence, leaving with Mary amidst a sea of belongings. Time passed, and following Nancy's counsel, I enlisted a proficient lawyer to handle my divorce. This professional aid smoothed out the intricate proceedings, granting me peace. Moreover, I was informed that the funds I had reserved for Peter's education could be claimed as child support. Meanwhile, rumors about Mary's inappropriate relationship with a parent from the basketball club circulated rapidly, leading to her job termination. Seeking support from her family proved futile as Nancy refused to intervene, leaving Mary bewildered and isolated. Her disdain for a man without financial means was palpable. She scorned Daniel and refused his attempts at reconciliation. Neither Peter nor I felt inclined to mend ties. Nancy was overwhelmed with guilt over her daughter's involvement in the disintegration of my family. Holding the despondent principal's hand, I expressed my appreciation. "Let's continue to collaborate. I'm genuinely thankful for your support, which helped me secure a new job. Work has been fulfilling, and life with just Peter and me brims with new hopes. Peter's genuine admiration warms my heart. Mom, the work you do is incredible. I'm so proud of you," he would say, his smile broad and sincere. As I leafed through a magazine showcasing my illustrations, I quietly dabbed away a tear. My resolve to pursue a career as an illustrator is stronger than ever, motivated by my deep love and commitment to my dear son, Peter.